O God of creation, direct our noble cause, guide our leaders right. Olayinka's face broke into a grin as she looked around her. Her fellow protesters, comrades, as they called themselves, were belting out the national anthem as if their lives depended on it. The part about guiding our leaders right seemed to touch everyone because it was belted with all the gusto they had. Lord knows that these are politicians need guidance because the lot of them are really weary. Yinka mused as she watched her comrades in protests. The protests she was attending had begun a week earlier, and because she had been worried it would turn violent, she stayed away. That is, until the night of the candlelight procession, when she found she could no longer keep away. The protest, which was peaceful, was dear to her heart because it reminded her of her elder brother, Damola, who went missing in 2010 when she was 10 years old. After reading the horrendous stories about the police unit called SARS, Yinka knew in her heart that they had something to do with his death. Yeah, everyone at home talked about Brother Damola as if he merely forgot the direction to their house, and so would someday find his way back home. It was easier for her parents to believe that. It helped them numb their pain. But for Yinka, she knew he was dead, believed it, and it is for this reason that she had brought Damola's old picture to the candlelight procession held for victims of police brutality. After that night, she knew she was definitely coming back to Lekki tollgate to join the peaceful protests. As Yinka watched her fellow protesters, her mind flashed to her mother. She had promised her that she would be home before 8 p.m. as she had something to tell her. Yinka needed to tell her mom about a recurring nightmare she's been having for over a week now. The nightmare always started out with her feet walking into an unpainted but spotless room. It looked like a prison room because of its high window, but was too clean, and every time she walked in, there was a young man with what appeared to be red paint all over him, facing the wall with his back to her. And each step she took closer to the young man seemed to agitate him, although he never turned to face her. And every time she got closer, she would clearly hear him whisper, "Go home." Horrified that her feet would always turn and run towards the door only to find it locked from outside, and the whispers of the young man always got louder as she pounded on the door, begging to be let out, and almost immediately the water would begin to fill the room, while she panicked and banged on the door till the water rose to her jaw. In that nightmare, Yinka didn't know how to swim, so she flailed and kicked weakly as the water rose swiftly and engulfed her. And while she drowned and sunk to the floor of the room, she would catch sight of the young man. He never moved from his spot, and his loud whispers always became a wail. Yinka didn't know what to make of the dream, but she was sure that her mother, a prayer warrior, would know what to do about it. The mother's prayer was a security blanket. The sound of a cheering crowd brought back Yinka's attention to her present. These coconut heads are really having a great time here at this protest. she mused. It is much better than violence and chaos, she concluded. For the first time in 20 years of her existence, Yinka felt so proud to be Nigerian and a youth. She knew they would get justice for Damola and other victims of police brutality. Yinka looked at her wristwatch and gasped. 6:40 p.m. It was time to go home. She had been at the protest ground since 12 p.m., and since the light was switched off at the toll gate, the sky looked darker than usual. She needed to go home. Looking around, she checked for a quicker exit and decided it was easier to leave through the barricade in front. Most of the protesters were sitting on the floor, so squeezing past them would be easier than trying to walk through the crowd behind her. So Yinka squeezed past her fellow protesters. Strangers before, but now brothers and sisters united in their demand for accountability and justice. As Yinka moved through the crowd, she returned greetings and smiled back at her comrades, who made way for her. Then, all of a sudden, there was excitement in the air. Some of the protesters who had been sitting rose to their feet and immediately started to sing the national anthem loudly. Yinka's path was blocked, so she paused and peered over the shoulders of the slightly taller young lady in front of her to see the source of the excitement. Soldiers. What are they doing? Gunshots interrupted their thoughts, and panic set in. Some of the protesters started to back away, while some stood their ground. Confused, Yinka didn't know where to go. Forward, backward, sideways. And just as she wheeled her feet to move somewhere, anywhere, Yinka felt something rip through her. Someone behind screamed as Yinka dropped to the floor. Hours later, a truck sped through the Lekki Express. In the back of that truck were bodies of young Nigerians gunned down while they sat peacefully and sang the national anthem at the Lekki toll gate. Perhaps the wind, garnered by the speeding truck, was instrumental in Yinka's jerking awake like someone waking from a bad dream. The pain on the left side of her stomach startled her. It reminded her that she had been shot by Nigerian soldiers, and in that moment, she realized that she wasn't alone. The pain she felt on her side was intensified by the weight of the person laid across her stomach, and when she tried to move her legs, she found it under the weight of another person. Wait a minute. Yinka's mind screamed as it began to dawn on her that her fellow occupants of the truck were dead. They had been shot just like her. The soldiers had shot at peaceful protesters. Yinka began to cry as the coppery smell of blood flooded her senses. She figured there were at least 10 dead bodies in the back of the truck with her. And as the truck sped towards Oworonshoki, Yinka cried and with trembling hands tried to push the body off her. God, he or she was too heavy. She tried again and again, but the body wouldn't budge. Yinka was 5'3" with a lean body. The body strewn across her stomach was bigger than her. The pain on her side intensified from her movement, and she cried out. The truck stopped abruptly. Yinka, worried that she might have alerted them with her cries, squeezed shut her lips as the pain worsened. She couldn't see, it was pitch black, and wherever they were had no electricity. Flashlight beam fell on her and moved quickly over the bodies before it was switched off. She could hear the men. Were they soldiers who shot at them? She wondered. One of the men barked for a rope, and Yinka heard a car door open and close. She heard another truck pull up. Yinka raised her head to see the truck, but the flashlight was turned off, and it was pitch black again. More heavy footsteps made their way toward the truck she was in, and in the blink of an eye, the body on her was pulled off, more like dragged off her. Yinka gritted her teeth as she tried to endure the pain, but now felt in her stomach, but a groan escaped her lips, and in the blink of an eye, a flashlight was beamed at her face. "We have a live one," one of the soldiers exclaimed as he pushed off the body laid on Yinka's ankles and grabbed a hold of Yinka's legs. As he dragged her out of the truck, Yinka sobbed and pleaded with him to take her to the hospital and save her. The soldier flung Yinka to the wet sand and kicked her as she wept and begged to be taken to a hospital. Curled up in a fetal position to protect her head, Yinka sobbed uncontrollably. Her stomach hurt 100 times more in that position. But she had gotten to a place where she knew she was more likely to die from another gunshot than the pain she was feeling. Yinka prayed out loud as she sobbed. She called out to her mother as she sobbed. She called out to her 2 older brothers who were students in the UK university. She called out to the soldiers to have mercy. She called out for her brother and all the spirits to save her. While she was curled up, she didn't see some of the soldiers huddled together to decide her fate. They had put 2 options on the table: to let her go with the others, or take her to the military hospital where she would be treated and monitored lest she talks to the media. They chose one and broke up the brief meeting. Yinka heard the soldiers bark at her to rise up and kneel. Mixed with fear and hope, she clutched her bleeding side and struggled to her knees. Her sobs were now reduced to a bad hiccup. "Look at me!" one of them barked again. A teary Yinka slowly lifted her head to look at the soldier and was rewarded with a heavy blow to the side of her head. Yinka slumped and passed out for the 2nd time that day. And while she was temporarily suspended in this place where she knew no pain or gun-toting violent soldiers, a bag of sand was secured around her waist with a rope before she was dumped into the lagoon, just like they did with bodies of her fellow comrades in the protest.